I'd bought the shirt for Christmas for my stepmother, who, while a brilliant chemist, was famous in our family for cremating roasts and burning even soup from a can, but lost my nerve before sending it. Why jostle a relationship that had recently settled into a pleasant détente? I tucked my phone into my pocket and dashed off a note to my roommate, Miss Gloria, who lets me live on board her houseboat in exchange for errands, like grocery shopping, which I adore anyway, and sending occasional reports on her mental and physical condition to her son in Michigan. I stand between her and a slot in an old age home, and I take my responsibility seriously. The Queen's Guard of Tarpon Pier. I wrote, jogging, ugh, call me if you want a coffee. Then I hopped off our deck, tottered along the dock, and started grinding up the Palm Avenue hill over the Garrison Bight, which is Key West speak for harbor toward the Old Town section of Key West. There aren't many changes in elevation in this town, so I was just as happy to get this challenge over with early on. I puffed past the U.S. Naval Air Station's multi-story building, Fly Navy, and then by the pale pink and green cement block apartments for enlisted folks and their families. I finally chugged around the curve onto Eaton Street, my lungs burning and my thighs cramping into complaining masses. I picked up my pace, pushing harder because I smelled bacon. The Cole's Peace Bakery called to me like a siren to Ulysses. Stopping for an unscheduled bacon and cheese toast on crispy Cuban bread would devastate my fledgling resolutions. As I hooked right on Grinnell, heading toward the boardwalk that wound along the historic seaport area, I tried to distract myself by thinking about my tasks for the day. There'd be email to answer, as the bi-weekly issue of Key Zest, our fledgling Key West style magazine, hit inboxes today. And I was in charge of responding to the usual flurry of complaints and compliments. For the first time in my short career, I'd had to swallow hard and write a negative review. This was bound to come sooner or later. Key West is a foodie paradise, but like anywhere USA, there are lousy meals to be had too. As a careful follower of the major newspaper restaurant critics, I'd read plenty of stories about critics suffering through horrendous dinners, or worse yet, bouts of food poisoning. I'd actually memorized one of the New York Times critic Sam Sifton's sharper quotes. And lobes of dismal flavored sea urchin served over thick lardo and heavy toast were just dreadful. The eighth band after Nirvana to write loud, soft, loud music and call it new. But hearing about rotten reviews and writing them were two different animals. I wasn't convinced that I would ever develop a killer instinct. Famous critics seemed to enjoy ripping apart a horrible dinner. Me? I could only imagine the chef sweating in the kitchen, slaving over the stove, plating the meal, praying that his special whatever hit the mark. It broke my heart to think about dissing some poor chump's food. My second meal at Just Off Duval a couple nights earlier had started off well. True to its name, the restaurant was located a half block from Duval Street, far enough from the bustle of the town's main party artery to mask the grit and noise. My friend Eric and I had ordered glasses of wine and settled into the pleasant outdoor patio edged with feathery palm plants to enjoy our dinners. The night was cool enough for a sweater, and the scent of roasting meat had my stomach doing anticipatory backflips. A half loaf of stale Italian bread and a pool of olive oil that tasted almost rancid were the first signs the experience would be a downer. I jotted a few notes into my smartphone, agreeing with Eric. Any restaurant should be allowed a tiny misstep. But then my chef's special salad was delivered, a small pile of lettuce dog-paddling in thick blue cheese dressing that screamed emulsifier and wore powerful overtones of the plastic bottle it must have been squeezed from. On top of that were chunks of pale pink mealy tomatoes, though the mashed potatoes that accompanied the main courses were creamy and rich. My $38 fish smelled fishy, and Eric's $42 steak was stringy. We didn't have the nerve to order dessert. I hadn't actually gotten ill, but my stomach had roiled for half the night.